Hi everyone, Anthony Morganti here. It is my opinion that if you're a wildlife photographer, Topaz Labs Photo AI is an essential application to own. Unfortunately, with some recent updates to Photo AI, Topaz Labs has made it a bit difficult for the wildlife photographer to properly use Photo AI if they're using it as a Lightroom plugin. In today's video, I want to explain why that is so, and then I want to give you a workflow that you could use if you are editing a wildlife image in Photo AI. Now, as you can see, I have an image opened up into Lightroom Classic. I did some editing to this image already. There's before and there's after. I did a significant crop on the image as well. Now, if I zoom in, you'll see that there is a considerable amount of noise, and the goldfinch isn't quite as sharp as I'd like it to be. I did focus okay, but I think because I cropped away so many pixels, it's just not as resolute as it could have been if I could have reached it with a longer lens. And that really is kind of the bane of the wildlife photographer. Often we can't get close enough to the subject, or our lens isn't long enough. So we have to do a significant crop. And sometimes the light isn't that good and we have to use a higher ISO, or there's movement, we have to use a higher ISO, so we get a lot of noise. This is why I believe Photo AI is an essential tool for the wildlife photographer, because with it, we could reduce noise, we could sharpen the subject, and we could increase the resolution of a heavily cropped image all in one fall swoop. Now, I have this edited image in Lightroom Classic. In older versions of Lightroom, there really was only one way to send an image from Lightroom Classic into a plugin, and that was through the Edit In menu. One way to get to the Edit In menu is to go to Photo, down to Edit In, and over and down to your plugin. The problem, though, when doing it this way, you lose the raw file. For example, if I go down to Photo AI, you'll notice I only could send it as a TIFF, PSD, or JPEG. I can't send the Nikon RAW file. It's got to be one of those three file types. Well, most of us like to keep our RAW file throughout our workflow. So with latter versions of Lightroom, Adobe came up with a solution. You could go up to File, down to Plugin Extras, and then over and down to your plugin. And with most of these plugins, when you send the RAW file to it, you'll get back a RAW file, a DNG file. And it used to be that way with Photo AI. Well, with a recent update, it's no longer that way. For example, I'll go down to Process with Photo AI. We'll take this image and bring it into Photo AI. Now, you really don't see anything here. It says Nikon up here .nef. But actually, if I save this now and go back to Lightroom, I'll get a TIFF file. Now, Topaz Labs has mentioned that they hope to return that RAW file functionality in a future update, but as of making this video, they have not yet done that. Now, I want to just mention a couple other things. You'll notice that I have my unedited RAW file here. So if I go up to Fit, it doesn't reflect my crop, nor is it showing my edits at all. Photo AI always has done that. So when you sent an edited image from Lightroom Classic using that Plugin Extras menu, you got the original RAW file look without any edits done to it at all. Now, I'm going to bring it back. I'm not going to do anything yet. I'll show you what a full workflow in a moment. But let's just go down and export it to Adobe Lightroom Classic. You'll see it's going from a Nikon RAW file to a TIFF. That's my main issue. In the past, it would come back with a DNG file. Now, you'll notice, too, that the file I got back is totally unedited. And with the earliest versions of Photo AI, that's what happened. Even with the DNG file, you got a totally unedited image. With latter versions of Photo AI, you got the DNG file, but it copied your edits to it. So when it was in Photo AI, it was totally unedited. When you came back from Photo AI, it would just automatically copy your edits. Well, now it's back to its original functionality in that it returns a file with no edits done to it at all. And on top of that, it's no longer a DNG file, it's a TIFF file. Now, what you can do if you do want to use Photo AI using it as a Lightroom plugin, the way I just did, what you can do is click on your edited file, then immediately click on the non-edited file and go over here on the right-hand panel and click Previous, and it will copy all your edits to this file. This still isn't the optimum way, in my opinion, to use Photo AI because now we have a TIFF file, and I'd prefer to have a raw file. So what I recommend you do for any image, but particularly wildlife photographers, is take your unedited raw file and open it up directly into Photo AI. So I'm going to close down Lightroom Classic. And on my desktop, I have this exact raw file, this exact image right here, and I have Photo AI down here. So we'll open up Photo AI. Now I'm going to show you my full workflow, what I would do. I'd browse my images and I'd go to this raw file and I'd open up directly. Now I'll do my editing. Now, if you're not familiar with Photo AI, when you open an image up into it, whether you're using it as a standalone app, as a plugin in Lightroom or a plugin in Photoshop, it does something called autopilot. It examines the image and determines what the image needs. In this case, because it is a raw file, it's going to apply raw denoise to it automatically. And for this specific image, it has decided that it needs to sharpen the image. And if you hover over sharpen, you'll see that it will put a red overlay temporarily over the subject. So that's pretty cool, right? So it found the subject fine and it sharpened it. You'll see that I can remove this. If I don't want to sharpen the image, I could just click the X and take it away. But you'll notice with raw denoise, I'm not able to do that. I cannot remove raw denoise. So if you have a raw file opened up directly or through a plugin into Photo AI, you can't remove this. That's unfortunate because sometimes raw denoise isn't the best model to use. Sometimes one of the other models is better. What I recommend you do is, if you cannot get the noise removed to your satisfaction with raw denoise, is that you just come in and take all the sliders down to 0 and then go to add enhancements and add denoise. And when you do that, you'll have different models. You'll have normal, strong, and extreme. And quite often, one of these models will do a more effective job at removing the noise than the raw denoise did. So that's what I recommend you do. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go here and let me remove this denoise I just added, all right? What I recommend you do, though, is if you need to crop the image, is after you open the image up into Photo AI and it does its autopilot settings, don't touch any of your autopilot settings. Just let it do what it did. So we have everything set the way it's set. Then immediately crop the image. So we'll go to crop, right? And I want to keep my 3:2 ratio. I just want it vertical. So I'll click on swap and then I'll just move this over this way and then I'll pull down from the top. So I'm just going to do the same crop that I had in Lightroom, pretty much the same crop, and then click apply. Now, once you do that, you have your cropped image. Now, the next thing I recommend, because you cropped it, you need to increase the resolution. Do that next. So go to add enhancements and then go down to upscale. Now you'll have options here to upscale. I think 2x would be good. It will make it 3950 in width and 5916 in height. That's pretty good. I could get a pretty large print from that. You can, of course, choose 4x. You could come in and max it out, or you could put in your own scale in here as you see fit. So, you want it 6x or something like that. You could do that as well. Now, with the upscale, you also get different models. Right now, it's at high fidelity. You can see there's a number of different models. If you have graphics, if you're a low resolution JPEG, you could use that. For this image, I think high fidelity will work, and for the sake of time, let's just go with that. Once you choose your specific model, you'll get applicable sliders for that model below it. In this case, it has 3 sliders. I'm just going to keep those default settings. Those look pretty good, actually. And then we're just going to close this down. All right. Now you'll see that upscaling is almost always processed last. So if I go in and I start moving sliders for other things here, it's going to have to go through its kind of autopilot for the other settings. It's going to kind of ignore upscale while it's doing that. Let me just show you. I think it's easier if I show you. Let's open up denoise. Let's kind of move it down so we could see the bird a little better. It then has to go through everything again. That's what I mentioned. So it's going to do upscaling last. And just let it do its thing and generate the preview. Okay, that looks good. Now, noise. Actually, noise looks pretty good now when I upscale the image, because upscale will remove noise as well. So with raw denoise and upscale used together, it actually looks pretty good. So I don't think I need to do anything here. Let's go to sharpen. And if you don't think it sharpened the subject properly, you could come in and, fix that if you need to. In this case, I think it looks pretty good. Let's go back here. As you can see here, it has the red overlay on the subject, so I think that looks pretty good. I don't think there's anything missed there. We'll go back to controls. Do I want to tweak anything? The noise looks pretty good. It might be just a tad over sharpened, so I'm just going to bring this down a little bit. Now, because it is still going to be an unedited raw file as far as like tone and things like that, I do have to do other editing on it. And I could do some sharpening in whatever application I use. It could be Lightroom, it could be Photoshop, whatever. So I'm not too worried about nailing the sharpening in Photo AI. I just want to make sure that I don't have it over sharpened, because that's, always something you want to try to avoid with any image, particularly a wildlife image. Again, now it's taking a while because it has to, I just moved it a little, so it has to start over. So it's going to have to go through everything and apply the settings and then upscale it at the end. And that's what enhancing is. That's what it's doing. And you can see sharpen is spinning up there. So it's still doing its thing. It's a little slow. Of course, if you have an older computer, this could take weeks. It's going to be really, really slow. But for the sake of this video, I'm not going to do much more to it, so we won't have to sit and wait through it. Let it do its thing and generate the preview. And all right, let's, for the sake of argument, say that's what we like and that looks pretty good. So we're done. So what I'll do is I'll export the image. Now, I just want to remind you, if you go up to add enhancement, there's other things you could do. There's a remove tool. If I wanted to remove, it looks like a spider on the butt of the goldfinch, I could remove it, but I'm going to leave that there, of course. If you're working with graphic art, you could preserve text, things like that. You could adjust lighting. I think as far as this image is concerned, I'm done. In future videos, I think I'll go and I'll cover everything here, balance color and adjust lighting specifically in face recovery when you have a portrait. But for this wildlife image, I think we're done, and we'll click export. And when I do that, you'll notice that I have the ability to save it as a DNG file. I also could save it as JPEG, PNG, TIFF, or preserve the input format. Now, if you do preserve input format, and in this case I imported a NEF, or a Nikon RAW file, it's still going to save it as a DNG. Same thing if it's a Fuji RAW file, Nikon RAW file, Canon RAW file, Sony RAW, doesn't matter. It's going to save it as a DNG. It's not going to create a .NEF file. So either or will do the exact same thing. I'm not going to compress it at all. And I'm going to save it to desktop. I'll let it rename it. I'll just click save for the sake of getting the video done so you guys don't fall asleep on me. So it's saving the file. And then once it's done, this box will stay here, and I could close down the box. I could keep editing. You'll see options in a moment that do its thing. Then I'm going to just do a finish up edit on it, how I would do it. Now, you could import it back into Lightroom and save time. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to open it up into Photoshop's Adobe Camera Raw because it will be faster. And Camera Raw uses the exact same editing engine or processing engine as Lightroom. So it will get the same exact edit out of it. And of course, Camera Raw's editing is recognized by Lightroom and vice versa. So we're going to close the window. We're going to get rid of the application. And here's our edited app. And you can see that it is now vertical. I'm going to open it up into Photoshop. And once it opens in Photoshop, because it is a RAW file, it's going to open up into Adobe Camera Raw. And then I'll show you, if you do use Adobe Camera Raw, what you need to do to properly save the image. And we'll do a quick edit on it as well. Okay, if it ever opens. Okay, it's opened up into Adobe Camera Raw. Now I'm just going to do my normal edit on it. This is a RAW file. I'm going to bring highlights down a little bit, open up shadows quite a bit. I'm going to get a white point, hold the Option key on my Mac, Alt key on a PC, move this to the right, see some color come through, and then back it off till all that color dissipates. Similarly, I'll do that for blacks. This time I get a fully white screen or almost fully white screen. Back that off, kind of eyeball it. And I think that's all right. I'm going to go to masking. I'm going to mask the subject. See, it caught the bird fine. I'm going to go down to effects. I'm going to add some texture and some clarity. Make sure I don't still over sharpen it. We'll go to detail. Now, if you like the colorful background, by all means, leave it. Personally, I don't care for the colorful background. I just want to suck some of the color out. I think it will put more emphasis on the goldfinch. I think the background is just too colorful. So I'm going to add a new mask, and I'm going to select the background. And it's selecting this tree here. So I'm going to subtract from that. I don't want to take the color away from that. And I'm going to use objects for that. We'll take our thing here and just subtract this. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then here I want to go to color, and I want to decrease saturation. There we go. And then one more thing, I do want to do something with that old tree. So I'm going to select objects, and we'll go in here and select this tree. And it selected the bird's legs as well. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to subtract from the subject with a brush. And we'll come in here and just take the bird's legs away from our selection. And then here, I do want to go to effects. And for that tree, I want to add some texture and clarity. And then to finish off the entire image, we'll go back and do the global editing, and we'll go to let's see here, effects, and we're going to go to vignette, and we'll add a darker vignette. Now, let's say we're done with our editing. If you are using Camera Raw, if you just click done, as I did, what's going to happen is it's just going to save all those edits to that original raw file, the DNG file. But if you want to share it, or you want to send it to a lab to be printed, it really can't. They can't use the DNG file. Most labs need a JPEG. Some will accept a TIFF as well. So what you need to do instead is, I'll open this up, and you see that it has all my edits done to it. What we can do instead is you need to open it up into Photoshop. So click open, and it will take the image and open it up into Photoshop proper. Now, if you want to do some adjustments here, you can as well. But for the point of this video, let's say we want to send it to a lab and we need to send a JPEG. Well, then what you'll need to do is go to File, then to Export, then down to Export As, and we want to send it a JPEG, and we want to keep the full resolution if we're sending it to a lab. We don't want to send a smaller file. You may even want to click quality up to 7. It's just going to make the file larger. Won't necessarily make it better, but it will make it larger, maybe will make it better. And then you just click Export, and you could give it a name. I'm going to call it Goldfinch, and we'll save it to the desktop. So it's a JPEG. Now, if you try to close Photoshop, it's going to prompt you to save the image. You still have, since I didn't do any editing in Photoshop proper, I did all my editing in Adobe Camera Raw, it's still going to have those edits in Adobe Camera Raw. So you don't have to save it at this point if you don't want to. If you do save it, it's going to save it as either a PSD or a JPEG, a Photoshop file, or I'm not a JPEG, I'm sorry, a TIFF file. You could save it as JPEG, but preferably you'd want a Photoshop or TIFF file. In this case, we'll go with the Photoshop, keep the original name, and click Save. Now, once it's done, it'll close down, and you can see that we have the original raw file, then we have our DNG file that we did our editing in first, Topaz Labs Photo AI, and then later we did some Camera Raw editing there, and all those edits are there. We exported it as a JPEG, and we saved it as a PSD file. And there is that. Now, if you are a Lightroom user, what you can do, instead of opening it up into Camera Raw, is you could just import this image into Lightroom, and then it will be in Lightroom and be in your catalog. So that's my workflow that I recommend you use when you're editing any image, but particularly a wildlife image in Photo AI. Now, hopefully the return that functionality back to Lightroom Classic so that when you do send the image into Photo AI, it comes back as a DNG file, and this whole video would be moot. But until then, that's it. That's the way I recommend you do it. Thank you, everyone who watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon.